Hello, friends. That is the first song because I realized I didn't play music on the previous episode. So this is now the second song. It goes a little something like this. I am an expert on being an expert on being an expert. But do you agree? Or are you an expert on your own sense of being an expert? Oh, but that doesn't matter much to me. It's about life. So, uh, you know, as I put in the little summary I just typed up, and I was thinking about what I'm going to talk about. Um, People kind of these days are, often saying, "Oh, you got to defer to the experts." You got to, follow the science or listen to, oh, you don't want to be a conspiracy theorist, or you don't want to, be an extremist. That's true. You don't want to be an extremist. That's true. But you want to defer to the experts, and there's some truth in that, but there's also some, a lot of nonsense in that too. So I thought I'd just piece that apart a bit as best I can. And if you want to listen to me, then I guess that means you think I'm qualified to talk about it. And if you think I'm not qualified, then you're very welcome to not listen to me. I would encourage you to not listen to me if you think I'm not qualified to talk about my experience. Um, so, yeah, let's start with um, in life, most, like, nothing in life is separable from everything else. Everything's all connected. It's all one, right? Buddha, bring out the Buddha. You are correct, Jamie. Thank you, Siddhartha. That's good to know. Well, that's just his opinion, but Um, so everything's connected, like your mind and your body. Oh, you want to be happy? Okay, well, you change your diet, and then my gut health is much better, and then all like not, all the serotonin or 90% of it is produced by the gut bacteria. And so and then my mind works much better now. Oh wow! And then you make better choices, and so um, because your mind's thinking clearer, you get healthier. Your body gets healthier. You make better choices, and then some problem you had goes away. Oh, you no longer have, I don't know, whatever it is, some problem, skin problem. So it's like, oh, the body and the mind are connected. Interesting, both ways. And also, like, you could say, there's the whole thing of the dating of the Sphinx, where it's like Egyptologists said, like, oh no, there's no way that it's 12,000 years old. That's crazy. But then geologists were like, well, I don't know what to tell you, pal, but like that's water erosion. That's not wind erosion. So the last time it rained considerably in the Nile Valley was like, you know, 10,000 odd years ago. And they were kind of going out, well, oh no, that's not. So you've got these, who's the expert there? It's Egypt, but, there's water erosion or there is erosion. The expert on erosion or the expert on Egypt? Who's the relevant authority here? And so, there's many times or teenager who understands themselves and they're like, no, I think it's best for me to follow this path. I'm going to be successful at, being a restaurateur and, opening restaurants. And then the parents are like, I don't know. From my experience of you, I think you're going to shift, you're going to do that and you get bored. And then I think it's better if you just get a general education for now. Stay in school. Who's right? They both have some understanding of the person. Um, so it's not clear, right? So that's one thing, that there's many situations where who is the expert on something. There are many overlap. It overlaps because it's things are all connected and there's many aspects to things. And so then if you're like defer to the experts, okay, well, which one? And then I'd say also you have and so for example, in the notes to this thing, I was just thinking like, yeah, like the whole COVID thing and like, all these quote unquote experts saying all these things, but then there were all these other people. For one thing, there are all these other experts, so to speak, scientists, journalists, um, politicians, who were disagreeing with the mainstream narrative and saying, no, this is a bad idea, the whole way through, from almost the very beginning, like within a month or so, this was happening, which people are trying to rewrite history, saying, oh, we did the best we could. It's like, no, no, no. It was very clear very early on what was going on, and people were either unable or unwilling to listen, but either way, that disqualifies you from leadership going forward, because we can't have those kinds of people running things. Anyway, but so yeah, and like, say sometimes I'd be disagreeing with someone, and I'll say, oh, well, I'll be like, oh, well, I think this thing, and I'll say some controversial opinion which, most people wouldn't agree with. It's not the conventional wisdom, but I like looking into things and finding out what's really real. It's interesting for me. I understand that for a lot of people, it's not that interesting. Maybe they like to dip their toes. I guess if you're listening to this, you're probably, you're interested enough that at least you want to dip your toes, or maybe you look into these things very deeply too. But that I have no problem. Like, just because 99% of people believe something, for me, that's no guarantee that it's true. It makes it more likely. To be fair, there's usually that happens. Like, let's say the crowd believes things because of peer pressure and politics, but it also believes things because they're true. So we could say, like, on a basic rough sketch of it, at least 50% of the reason is that it's true. And in reality, I think it's probably more. Like, there's just so many very simple things that aren't contested, and so I would say, yeah, like, the crowd can be right a lot of the time. But nonetheless, just because something, not most people believe something, for me, that's no guarantee that it's true, because I found in my life many times when it's not true and most people are wrong. It's like, bicycle helmets, the countries that don't have bicycle helmet laws have lower injury rates. What's that all about? Apparently, maybe people are complacent when they've got the helmets on. Maybe their senses are dulled because they can't see as well. They can't turn around as quickly. What is it? Who knows? But yeah, so that's one thing where you're like, what? Really? Well, yeah, I looked into that. As far as I could tell, I wrote a little article on it. And yeah, that's so anyway, there'll be many times where I'm saying, oh yeah, giving my opinion for why I think this unconventional thing is true, and the other person will say to me, well, I defer to the experts, and then I think, well, I go, well, yeah, well, I respect the experts too, but it's just I'm listening to different experts. I'm listening to this doctor, I'm listening to that journalist, this person, and then that's always kind of like an uncomfortable thing. Like, well, that's not really the experts, because there's some wacky experts on the internet. It's like, look, the internet is like a telephone system. Like, these people are on the earth, they eat food, they go to the toilet, they're human beings. Are they, if people are right, we know that sometimes systems are wrong, and few individuals are telling the truth, but the system at large isn't. And whenever that happens, those people will be marginalized, of course. That's just the way things work. And so, of course, they're going to take to alternative media platforms to get the thing out. So if it's like, oh, you've got some unconventional opinion, oh, but that's just on the internet. Of course it's on the internet. Where else would it be? Like, that doesn't mean it's not true. It also doesn't mean it is true. It could be wrong, like flat Earth. Like, I don't think that makes any sense. I think that's wrong. I haven't really looked into it, but I mean, and I'm the kind of person where I'm so radical in this sense that I would keep my mind open to that possibility. Like, are we in some sort of simulation? It's like a computer game, and it kind of is. I don't know, but I think it's like extremely unlikely. That's how I would see it. But that would translate into most people's vocabulary as just, it's impossible. So yeah, I don't believe that. But that would be an example where it's unconventional, but it's wrong. But yeah, so people say, oh yeah, but okay, well, most of the experts are on this side. So what I mean by I defer to the experts is I defer to the consensus of experts. But then the thing is, well, okay, right, but again, throughout history, most doctors thought lobotomies were good. Most doctors thought leeches were good. They were all wrong. It was or like maybe most people in maybe in a village thought witches were real. Doesn't mean witches are real. Well, although yeah, if we want to get really deep, um, and yeah. So and then you have to come up against some other factors of okay, study history. How do things work? Okay, the Earth generates resources, and the Earth generates life, and some yeah, like I mean, some of these creatures who are generated, they will perceive other things as resources, food, other animals and plants. They can be resources. They're things that can be used. Also, the rocks and the minerals, the water, the air. These are resources, things that can be relied upon. We They are the source that which we can go to for whatever our needs and wants. And then, these animals squabble over, the access to these resources, these opportunity pathways. Um, and as that's going, you have politics, you have, advanced societies built upon this thing. It's like the animal, built on top of the animal kingdom. You have these, human civilizations competing and doing their thing and growing and experimenting and whatever, just living. Um, and there's politics. Some of them are dictatorships, some of them are democracies. But the people who have power, they have money, so they've got legal right to, or force of violence. They've got control over resources and streams of resources, and including influence and awareness and eyeballs and perception, what people believe, and that's the media. One of the most precious resources is what people believe, and not just attention, but awareness. I guess is ultimately the most precious of resources. It's actually ultimately the only thing as well, it seems. Um, but kind of coming full circle, even in that most materialist sense of chopping stuff up and getting deep into three-dimensional reality, it turns out in the end, like awareness is kind of this hot commodity. Um, but so yeah, the powerful people. There are powerful people who want to be the alpha chimps, and they're not interested in what's reasonable or harmony. That's not their ethic. Their ethic is might is right, and those kinds of people will for sure lie and twist information in order to get advantage. And I think that you have to be aware of the potential that basically as we know through our history, this has happened. Propaganda, that's a word for a reason. People are lying, organized lying by governments. So, and also you could say not just governments, but powerful entities. And so, when you have experts, you have to be aware, like, okay, where are they getting their money? How do they pay their bills? Who's paying their salaries? And when you see stuff like, say, universities in the USA getting like over half their budget from the pharmaceutical industry, going, hey, here's some money, build yourself another wing, and go, get another professor here. Yeah, you can hire another professor, but add another discipline. Yeah, all good. Yeah, and cozying up. But when those wacky, crazy people come talking about how you can heal your body with your mind or with healthy lifestyle, and those people are to be resisted. So there's a bit of an influence thing there, and in government, like industries paying election funding for politicians, who will then go on to choose bureaucrats in many cases. Um, uh, so those politicians, they have to get elected, and so it's hard to get money, and someone's going to give you money, then it's very likely you're going to take it. And so some industry, like the military industrial complex, is like, hey, yeah, here's some money, and then you get into office, they're like, great, yeah, and we're really looking forward to you supporting our causes and being pro our interests and all that kind of thing, not rocking the boat. And if it's very subtle, I think in most cases, not like so outwardly spoken. It's just subtle, as subtle as possible, but obvious enough. I would imagine, and so and maybe with some more clearly corrupt people, it'd be very obvious, like just clearly stated, what's going on. But so people get money, and there's influence peddling, lobbyists. There's huge industry around the world, but America in particular. But And then if they go against it, they change their mind. No, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do the right thing. I'm going to follow the truth. Then they find, like, oh, you're not going to get money next election, which is coming up, and your competitor next door is going to get a lot of money, and so much money that there's an army of people out in the streets handing out leaflets, knocking on doors, people, radio time, advertising, all this stuff, whatever, promises for, I don't know, whatever, like, or like events, like giveaway, whatever. Money can do a lot of things. And so there's this selective pressure where people, even there'll be a lot of them will be intimidated, and so they'll back down. They won't even try to do it once that's that thing is threatened and waved around. But then even people who have the goal to push through and continue with it, in a lot of cases they will lose. The public will get hoodwinked and will vote for the other person who looks better and has this big army of people going around, and they're like, oh, a really nice person came along for that campaign, so I'll vote for them. And so you have this thing where there's selective pressure on politicians from money, bureaucrats from money. I mean, in a lot of cases, the bureaucracies, what happens is people who are in there, they will be offered jobs when they leave in the industries they're meant to be regulating, and so they get a lot of money, and so and then and then maybe someone who they know who's now they're in contact still. You worked with them back in the government. You kind of talk to them and, hey, come on, it's the company's good, and you can, after when you leave, you can join too. And so then they make a deal, and then that's a revolving door, and it gets really, by this point it's like the people who have left government, they've gone back into the private sector, they will be then going back into government as well. So it's even more crazy, where it's like more direct. Like, yeah, I'm just fresh. Dick Cheney bombed Iraq with no cause, no good reason, right? There were no weapons of mass destruction, and they knew it. It was a lie. Geopolitics, then so he blew up all this infrastructure and then awarded a no bid contract. Like, it's not about who can do the best job, and you make bids and then we'll choose one. Not even that, just no bids, just straight to Halliburton, which he was former CEO of. And there's all kinds of stuff like that going on. Or was it Timothy Geithner or whatever, the guy, Treasury Secretary? Was he the one who gave authorized the bailouts? And he was like former Goldman Sachs, guy. And Goldman, they get bailed out. All these competitors, no, nah, I don't think they need it. But like all these so there was this consolidation where these politically connected banks were bailed out and the others weren't. And so again and again. So the bureaucracy is, over time, there's a selective pressure where money, and again, powerful people can control money, whether it's mafia, going around doing business and having this competitive advantage of you can pull out a gun every now and then if you want to really persuade someone. So you have that kind of thing, that kind of influence, but also just, powerful industries where they get strong enough by providing value to people and solving problems, but then they get influence over the political system. They bring in regulations which harm the smaller competitors. They start turning into monopolies. So you have that kind of thing where you have the bureaucracy, money and power kind of controlling, but let's say with money, power-hungry people, they'll often start with money, right? That's a way to get things the way you want them. The bureaucracy, the politicians, even the judiciary, the judges, they're elected or chosen by politicians every so now and then, every so often. And so if over decades politicians have had this selective pressure of corporate and big money control, which they have in almost everywhere in the Western world as far as I'm aware, then who's choosing those judges? It's politicians who've been kind of chosen in a way by money. And then, the executive is chosen out of, these politicians. So you've got the government and the police and military. That's a more interesting one. But I mean, the military, there is the stuff of the revolving door between the arms industry in, say, America, and then in the actual military itself. Other parts of the world, I'm not so sure, but police, I mean, there's corruption for sure. Like, people who are like, yeah, okay, we're a bunch of gangsters and we can, camp outside your house and make everything really difficult for you if you try to clamp down on our operations of selling drugs or whatever. or you can take this money and give your, get your kid into a really good college. What's it going to be, And you see that playing out really intensely in Mexico, for example. But in all kinds of places it happens. I think anywhere there's a drug war, really. But and many other things where powerful people, they have the ability to try to help people get into the police force. I would say via their politicians and who's going to be the head of the police. There's politicians, political control, and bureaucratic control, and judicial control to some extent. Actually, I'm not sure about judicial, so there's some less direct influence on the police as well. So you've got the government, right, and then the scientific thing, the universities, and and things like what else? The media, they're owned by like the main media outlets around the world, in the Western world. Like there's government media, right, who are, of course, beholden to money via the politicians and the bureaucracy being beholden to money over like decades, like this gradual process we've been talking about of the status quo. And it's not like one big thing, one big company doing this, but it's just, it's an environment, an ecosystem where this is allowed to happen. And, vested interests. And so the oil and gas industry has, their interests of what they go into the government and, the government media to be talking about, the pharmaceutical industry of their interests, the war industry of their interests, tech industry of their interests, whatever. And, they spend good money on getting their influence achieved. But then even the private media, the big ones, they're owned by a handful of corporations. I think 6 corporations own all of the major media outlets in the USA, for example. Like Vanguard and BlackRock, whatever, these big investment firms, they, are heavily invested in a lot of media. And all these media are also, going off to the Bilderberg group conferences, which are never mentioned in the media, where, all these elites from around the world, very powerful people, meet and discuss. We don't know what they discuss, but they do it, and they've been doing it since the early 50s. And I'm sure nothing's going on. Definitely. They're just meeting and spending a lot of money on these big conferences and getting everyone together, spending a lot of time and effort and keeping it secret. And even though that looks very dodgy and that makes them look bad if people become aware of it, but, they're doing it, and I'm sure they're doing nothing. There's nothing. They're probably just talking about sport or something in those meetings, which we're not allowed to know what they're talking about, when politicians and royalty and heads of media and, all this scientists and institutions are there and all this. But apart from the direct ownership of the media, where like, a lot of them are floated, so it's not just one person owning them, but the larger shareholders are these corporate entities. Many of whom, by the way, many of these corporations, they're separate, but they are kind of unified to some extent in that there's a thing called interlocking directorships, where the boards of a lot of these companies people are serving on multiple boards at once. And so there's a kind of thing where they're often moving in similar social circles, and people kind of say, oh, why don't we get this person onto that board over there? And you have this kind of competition for influence across industries, where, big shareholders, say they own a lot of shares in several different companies, they can try to advocate to have their directors kind of on each of the boards, or like people who are friendly with them. So you have this kind of phenomenon where there is companies aren't just influenced by the profit motive and competing. There's another motive, which is, well, a lot of the people at the helm of these companies have the power to guide these competing companies and to guide them in a way where maybe their interests can align in a way which creates an outcome which is good for certain shareholders over, say, other shareholders who might be more general public, And say, for example, like, it's in the interest of the media to tell the truth, and CNN looked very stupid when they were claiming Joe Rogan's on horse dewormer or whatever, horse, medicine with ivermectin, and, distorting the color of his face on the video they had where, they're editing it to make him look sick. And a lot of people were like, what? That guy? Isn't he like some health nut? Why would he be doing that? Okay, let's look into it. And then, 2-minute video, and they can see like a clip, and they're like, oh, that's him responding to it, and he just says, it's nonsense. Like, it's been listed as a medicine by the WHO or whatever for ages, and and it gets demolished. And so a lot of people who just quickly, let me just check that out. They're like, so that makes CNN look terrible, right? And it takes away the credibility, and all these legacy media outlets are crumbling in terms of viewership and respect in the public, and authority, basically, expertship, you could say, or expertise, or the perception thereof. And yet, so why would they do that? Well, because CNN is nested in a bigger structure. It's largely owned by these big corporations who are also heavily invested in pharmaceuticals. And they were making a lot of money off the vaccines. So, maybe they lose some money over in CNN. They make a lot of money over on, whatever, like Pfizer. And so, there are these calculations going on where they're not as separate as it may seem. They're branches, but they're connected to a thicker branch, a bit closer to the trunk of the tree. And so that's, media also. So you have all these, academia, media, big tech, government, business, all over the place. So wherever these powerful institutions that have leverage over society and over access to resources. And remember, we are, these primates who are wired to try to climb hierarchies and access resources, for mating reasons, for status, for self-esteem, whatever. We're wired to do it. And, it takes a certain spiritual kind of awareness to kind of mitigate those tendencies and keep them in order, So all these big institutions, there is an incentive and there's a very plausible mechanism for explaining how money could have corrupted them, and in some cases at least cause things which are not true to be presented as true. So it's like, oh yeah, but most of the experts say this is true. Well, yeah, but I mean, who's paying them? Who's paying their salaries? Like, where their budget's coming from? What interests are connected? There's a bigger picture. It's, how do you know it's their genuine expertise based upon their experience? And, not just like, are they wrong? And do you agree with them? And, experts disagree. I prefer this expert who says that, and you prefer that one who says something else. But also, not all the experts are being honest. A lot of them are afraid to step out on certain issues. A lot of them are kind of unaware. Well, I mean, that would be they're honest, but they're just unaware because they just believe, well, everyone says this. This is what I learned in school. The same school, which is, getting heavily funded by, these big corporate interests, like the way the system works. The university is getting a lot of money from there. So, there's people who are just unaware. There's people who are afraid to speak out. There's people who are making a calculated decision, like, I want to get ahead, and I'm not afraid of this, but like, I just want to. Just makes more sense for me. I don't want to get involved in that. That doesn't seem like a good idea. I'll let someone else deal with that. It's probably not the right time in history. There'll be some revolution eventually, but I'm just going to, turn a blind eye and get on with things and do some useful work over here, and not mention every example I see where there's corruption going on. And then there's other people who are exploiting it, and full on corrupt, and that could be good people who are just like, say conflicted people they've got a good heart there, but they're just like, can't control themselves. Like, they're addicted to the money and the status and the power. And then there's also psychopaths, about 4% of the population globally, cross-culturally, cross-societies. Apparently, it seems to be about 4% are psychopaths. And so they're also in the mix of doing things where people who have very low empathy, they're willing to manipulate people, and in some cases even enjoy inflicting suffering on people. So there's not always, I think, but I think there's the dark tetrad, whatever. So there are all these influences over like information. And so when someone's like, oh yeah, but most the experts, the people we're told know what they're doing, they say this. Why would they say that if it wasn't true? well, think of the bigger picture. Listen to this podcast again and think of the bigger picture. Um, so, they could be right or they could be wrong. But I think at the end of the day, you have to realize on any hot topic, it's very possible that the small number of experts who are saying, or people, let's just say people, the voices, could be totally right and all the others are wrong. Like I think Graham Hancock's right and all the Egyptological establishment is wrong. They might be right about some things, but the major thrust of it is like they're wrong. Like clearly there was this reboot of civilization. The evidence is very clear by this point. So then, okay, so we have the thing of like, okay, there's these reasons for influence and understanding that with experts, you can't be sure just because the quote unquote experts, most of them say something that is true. You need to think for yourself. I think, but then the question is, okay, how do I know when to trust my intuition versus what someone else is saying? Because I'm not perfect, right? And I think that would be like, knowing the limits of your expertise. Like in the title of this, what did I say? It's like, I can't remember. What was it? Like be the expert, right? Is that it? Be the expert. Exactly. Be the expert. So, you are the expert, and you're the expert on your own intuition. You're the expert on your own judgment, your own sense of when someone's telling the truth and when someone's wrong or lying. And even if you want to defer to the experts, which ones? How do you know which one to defer to? So you can never escape your own expertise and the need to cultivate it. Even if you want to defer, till the cows come home to experts, you can't abdicate your responsibility to develop your judgment on who should you be deferring that to, which experts should you be deferring to, because there are more than one. There's more than one opinion, more than one group there in almost every case. And so you should be reading, you should be practicing, you should be paying attention, just trying to become aware of like, oh, when was I wrong? When was I right? Which experts, it's things like, okay, look at people who have different opinions, see what their track records are, who's been right, who's predicted things in advance, who was wrong. And when they were wrong, who admitted it and changed their mind and who didn't, who says different things depending on who they're talking to, because that you shouldn't trust them, right? They're being dishonest. Who changes their, well, let's see, what else is there? So there are these certain characteristics which kind of mark out people as like, okay, yeah, you're willing to be proven wrong, you're willing to listen to people, and like, okay, oh, you have a lot of evidence there, okay, you can cite things and I look them up and they make sense, and so you can start to say pay attention to those criteria to figure out who are good experts, but also even just figuring out that criteria, like where did I get that list? I wasn't told that list. That's just I've accrued it by feeling it out over the years and kind of going like, oh, who seems to be trustworthy, and then I kind of notice these people, and then I can kind of make that abstract, abstracting that. I can say like, oh, okay, I guess this is the essence of what I'm doing. It's like people who do this, that makes sense. So I'm extracting the moral of these stories. But so we need to develop our ability to understand who to listen to. And also, so that's if you want to defer, to the experts all the time. But then you also need to be aware, like sometimes you're the expert, not just on your expertise, but also the expert on any particular issue. Like, oh, what is the right thing to do? Is it, there's a traffic light, red light, and you're driving in the middle of the night, and maybe it's your friend's birthday party and you're a bit late. You want to be there for the cake and you want to be there for the right moment. You're so late that, you could be missing some beautiful kind of crucial moment that could have negative consequences for everyone. So maybe you should just run that red light. There's no one around. So what's the right thing to do? Is it, no, hey, if you do that, then you're going to be more willing to do it in future, and maybe someone sees you and that encourages them to go, oh yeah, no one follows rules, I shouldn't follow rules, and they could do something wrong. Or is it like, no, yeah, there's many questions where it's not clear what the answer is, and so you are the expert in that situation because it's your opinion, um, and then what else is in that title there? Be the expert on uh, on where your expertise lies. So there's a double meaning there of like be the expert on where your expertise is, like where it lies, like where it is, where it is put, where what it covers, and know like say, oh, this is something where it's like anyone has the right to judge this. Like, should we lock down the whole planet or should we let people be free? That's kind of a very philosophical question, really. Should we be quarantining the vulnerable people, or even having it like they're allowed, they'll have government money if they want to quarantine themselves, but everyone else can do whatever they want, get back to work and life, socializing, and growing and all that, and funerals and weddings and all that, and births and all this. Or should it be everyone gets quarantined because some experts, so to speak, think it's a good idea? That's pretty like philosophical. Like that's there's details of like science and this and that, but a lot of that comes down on basic philosophical principles. And so you are the expert there. People say, oh, listen to the experts. Like, yeah, okay. And by experts that means everyone on this particular issue at least. And that also means be the expert on when your expertise on where your expertise lies. You could say this podcast is also on the topic of where, or you could say just be the expert on this topic of where you are actually, you think you know something but you don't. So you need to be aware of like not overextending and being humble and admitting when someone has genuine authority over you and when someone is just more knowledgeable than you, and then you should go, okay, hey, you know best, yeah, it's up to you, but it's at the end of the day, it's your expertise on when is it time to defer to someone else and when is it time to say, hey, no, like I know what the answer is, and I'm going to listen to my own voice here. So, and yeah, how do we know who the experts are? So yeah, mentioned that some criteria, but I think this leads to the basic thing, just to bring this home, is that I can have my view of who experts are in general on many different issues. Who would be the expert? And then other people, you will have a different view. Even if you're listening to this, maybe you have a kind of similar point of view on some of these issues, or a lot of them even. We're definitely going to have a different list, and at least one of your people and at least one of mine, if we kind of looked everyone up, we'd probably disagree, but I don't know about that person really, and that's just the way it is. And that's a good thing because this is diversity in the ecosystem of information. And this way we can figure things out. I paint a picture, this is how I think things are. Then you listen to it and go, okay, and filter it through your own senses and what makes sense to you. And then and anyway, and then you're painting other pictures and, other people are ingesting that and kind of thinking about it too. And we're all talking, free speech, just talking things out, that's how we figure out like what's going on, what is and what should be. And, including who are the experts, who is competent, who has the authority on any given topic, so I think ultimately, you can think about, all these things of, okay, who's more consistent, who's internally cohesive, their things match up with themselves, who, people who you respect, what the majority of them, how do they feel about this person? How do they feel about that person? And there's all these little ways of kind of balancing things out and checks and balances in the information and epistemology field of your mind and trying to figure out what's real, and what's right. But I think at the end of the day, it's always incomplete, and the solution is just thank God we have each other, and we talk, and luckily the world isn't going to just listen to me. because then we'd probably be making a bunch of mistakes because I'm just one person and I have blind spots. Everyone has blind spots. But if we all talk and we all think about things and then we are voting, say electing people who will actually represent us and, say we're creating businesses more directly which represent us because we own them and, people can vote with their dollars and all that. And, we're involved in the community and it's who makes most sense, who's respected most, civic engagement and that kind of stuff. Just through, talking and having a culture where it's encouraged to like think for yourself and to communicate and not be demonized or vilified for having a controversial opinion, but to have it understood that so long as it's respectful, and you're coming from a place of harmony in your heart, you're trying to do your part to, make things right in the world, and not coming from a place of hatred, but coming from a place of, love for progress or love for humanity. And even if you're not totally there, but you're doing your best, that that it should be celebrated that people have these contrarian opinions, because even if they're totally wrong, then we'll just notice that and be, oh, okay, good, that's one of the wrong things. All right, good, next, But then maybe every now and then the jester, the fool pops out with some wisdom, and everyone goes, oh wow, Hitler was a vegetarian. Does that mean vegetarianism's bad? No, he can be right about a few things, so I think, at the end of the day, it comes back to like, okay, who are the, the experts, like that anyone who's kind of peddling that, I think is, I don't know, I think it's just a bit of a simplistic and unhelpful way of thinking. But we should definitely respect authority, but that's not, government enshrined authority, because again, money controls government to a large extent. And what is money authority? Is that your God, whoever has more money? No, I think authority is truth. Authority is truth, like and virtue. What's real and what's right, and whoever best approximates and embodies these things, that's authority. And so we all carry authority within our souls to various extents and our lives in different capacities. And we should try to expand our own authority in that sense and encourage authority in others. So figuring these things out together, I think we can have a much more nuanced and helpful understanding of what expertise really is. We can make the world a better place. Not by having some top-down system of like, oh, just listen to whatever that person in a suit says, but understanding like, okay, things are deeper than that. There are many processes whereby institutions get corrupted over time, and ultimately the only security and the only guarantee of truth is that society at large mostly agrees, and that and even then it's not sure, but that's the best we've got, because we can get confused about stuff, and it might be a minority believe it, but just free speech is the engine, is the mechanism by which we figure out what is right, what the problems are, what the solutions are, and by disagreeing and agreeing and persuading and understanding that it'll be terrible, we're all gonna die if we try to just force each other to do things. So we have to try to, thank God, we are forced to try to engage and reason things out. And in the process, we have our blind spots revealed to us, and we all kind of get to kind of, okay, surrender a bit here, and let's not talk about that. Oh my God, I'm embarrassed, I was wrong. Or some other people like, oh yeah, I was wrong. Cool, I'll talk about that. That's great, whatever. But like the group can kind of adapt, and we can kind of, exercise competence and expertise as a species. So on that note, I'll finish. Thanks for listening. And if you enjoyed this, please subscribe and like it and post some gnarly comment. You're the expert of your comment. Let me know what you think should be said or asked. And if you have topics for me to talk about or questions that could become a topic, you might think it's very simple. I'm happy to do a 5-minute podcast on whatever question you have, It'll probably turn into a 50-minute podcast. So, much love, everyone, and I'll see you next week.